I always believed my wedding day would be perfect. Elegant flowers, delicious cake, beautiful venue, and most importantly, surrounded by supportive family and friends. My name is Sarah Mitchell, 32 years old, and I've spent my entire adult life planning other people's dream events while secretly hoping my own would someday measure up to the fantasies I created for them. When I met Michael 4 years ago, everything fell into place, and I could finally see that perfect day on the horizon. What I couldn't see was the storm brewing behind his mother, Evelyn's seemingly pleasant smile. You know those movies where the mother-in-law is comically overbearing? I used to laugh at those, thinking they were wild exaggerations. Now I know better. What should have been the happiest planning experience of my life turned into a psychological warfare campaign that ended with Evelyn watching our ceremony from the parking lot, uninvited and fuming. The invitations were the final straw, but looking back, I should have seen it coming from the very beginning. This is the story of how I discovered that sometimes the people closest to us can be the ones who test our boundaries the most, and how I finally found the strength to protect what mattered to me. Have you ever experienced a family betrayal that made you question everything you thought you knew? What helped you find your way back to solid ground? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our experiences helps others feel less alone in their struggles. Thank you for spending this time with me. If my story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing with someone who might need to hear they're not alone in family complexity. Remember that your story matters, even when others try to rewrite it. Take care of yourselves. Before Michael, I'd been laser-focused on building my career as an event planner, channeling my creative energy into making other people's special days memorable, while my own love life remained disappointingly stagnant. I'd had relationships, sure, but nothing that ever felt right enough to last. I was coordinating a corporate anniversary gala when I first noticed him. Tall, with kind eyes and a smile that made the corners crinkle in a way that immediately put me at ease. Michael was the company's marketing director, and we spent the evening collaboratively putting out small fires before they could disrupt the event. By midnight, as the last guests departed, he asked if I'd join him for a late dinner, and that was it. Our relationship moved quickly, both of us immediately comfortable in a way I'd never experienced before. Within 6 months, we were living together, and I was meeting his family. Evelyn welcomed me with a tight hug and homemade dinner the first time Michael brought me to her immaculate suburban home. "I've waited so long to meet the woman who's captured my Michael's heart," she said, serving pot roast that she proudly announced was Michael's favorite since childhood. The evening went smoothly on the surface, but I caught moments that should have been warning flags. The way she referred to our condo as Michael's place, despite us having chosen it together. How she showed me childhood photos while remarking how no one will ever know him like his mother does, and her casual questions about my work schedule that felt more like an assessment than genuine interest. Michael was her only child, and his father had passed away from a heart attack when Michael was in college, leaving the two of them unusually close. I noticed how Michael's phone would light up with her calls multiple times a day, how he'd immediately answer no matter what we were doing, and how he'd automatically adjust our plans if she needed anything. I ignored these warning signs, partly because I was head over heels in love, and partly because I'd always longed for a close-knit family. When Michael proposed on our 3rd anniversary with his grandmother's restored vintage ring, I was ecstatic. We celebrated alone first, then drove to Evelyn's house to share the news. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she hugged me and said, "Welcome to the family, dear. I hope you know what a special man you're getting." That night, as she pulled out photo albums and monopolized Michael's attention with family stories that pointedly preceded my existence, I pushed down my discomfort. I was excited to plan our wedding, and surely her behavior was just adjustment to the idea of her only son getting married. How wrong I was. Have you ever experienced a family betrayal that made you question everything you thought you knew? What helped you find your way back to solid ground? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our experiences helps others feel less alone in their struggles. Thank you for spending this time with me. If my story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing with someone who might need to hear they're not alone in family complexity. Remember that your story matters, even when others try to rewrite it. Take care of yourselves. The first month after our engagement was a blissful blur of congratulations, ring selfies, and excited phone calls with friends and family. I threw myself into preliminary wedding planning with the enthusiasm of someone who'd spent years helping. Others create perfect events and was finally crafting her own. Michael and I agreed on a spring wedding about 10 months away, giving us plenty of time to plan without feeling rushed. We envisioned an intimate garden ceremony with around 100 guests, immediate family, close friends, and a few colleagues who'd become important parts of our lives. When we shared our vision with Evelyn over Sunday dinner, her expression tightened, minutely before she recovered. Only 100? But what about your father's business associates, Michael? And all your cousins from Minnesota? And the church group that's watched you grow up? What had started as our intimate garden party was suddenly ballooning into a 250-person extravaganza under Evelyn's insistence that we would regret not including everyone. When I gently suggested that we wanted something more personal, she patted my hand condescendingly. Sweetie, weddings aren't really about what the couple wants. They're family events. You'll understand someday when you've been in the family longer. Michael, caught between us, tried to mediate. Mom, Sarah's literally a professional at this. I think we should trust her judgment. Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly before she sighed dramatically. Of course, you two do what you want. I just don't want you to have regrets or hurt feelings. This pattern continued as we selected everything from color schemes. Navy blue for a spring wedding? Wouldn't pastel pink be more appropriate? To menu options. Chicken and fish, but the Hendersons' daughter had prime rib at her wedding. I made small compromises where I could, adding a few of her preferred flowers to the arrangements and including some traditional elements to the ceremony that were important to her. The real battle erupted over the venue. Evelyn pushed aggressively for Willow Creek Country Club, where she'd been a member for decades. They'll give us a discount, she insisted, though the discount still put it well above our budget. When Michael and I discovered Rosemont Gardens, with its blooming cherry trees and charming stone pathways, we knew immediately it was perfect. It fit our budget, matched our vision, and had a warmth the country club's opulent ballroom lacked. When we announced our decision, Evelyn went silent, then cold. If that's what you've decided, she said stiffly, before excusing herself to the kitchen. For the next week, she barely spoke to Michael, responding to his texts with one-word answers, and canceling their weekly lunch. I felt guilty watching him worry about her, but also increasingly frustrated. She'll come around, Michael assured me, though the tension in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. I was determined to keep the peace while standing firm on the decisions that mattered most to us. Little did I know that these early skirmishes were just Evelyn testing our boundaries, preparing for the all-out war that was to come. As we moved deeper into the wedding planning process, Evelyn's tactics evolved from passive-aggressive comments to active sabotage. Suddenly, she had doctor's appointments that conflicted with our cake tastings. She had community obligations. That meant she needed Michael's help precisely when we were meeting with photographers. At first, I thought it was coincidental, until it happened for the third consecutive appointment. Your mom seems to need you a lot lately, I observed carefully as Michael canceled another afternoon we'd set aside for planning. He looked troubled, but defensive. She doesn't have anyone else, Sarah. Her arthritis is acting up. When I suggested that perhaps his cousin Linda could help occasionally, he seemed almost offended. She's my mother. Evelyn's intrusions weren't limited to creating scheduling conflicts. She began showing up uninvited to vendor meetings, arriving with a cheerful, I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. Before I could protest, she'd be questioning our florist about substituting the ranunculus in my carefully curated bouquet with carnations because they last longer, or telling the caterer that the appetizers we'd selected were too exotic for a family crowd. After these ambushes, she'd casually mentioned to Michael over their private lunches how concerned she was that I seemed so stressed and difficult to please. The florist mentioned you were quite adamant about those expensive flowers, she told him within my earshot. I hope you know what you're getting into with someone so particular. Michael frowned but said nothing in the moment, though later he asked me if I was perhaps being a bit rigid about certain details. The bridesmaid dress incident nearly broke me. After weeks of searching, My 3 closest friends and I had found beautiful sage green dresses that complemented each of them perfectly despite their different body types, a minor miracle in wedding planning. We were at the final fitting when Evelyn appeared, somehow alerted to our appointment. "Oh no, green. Washes out fair skin," she declared, eyeing my red-headed best friend Jane. "I've already found alternatives in a lovely mauve." She pulled out her phone to show a completely different style from a bridal shop across town, where she'd apparently already put dresses on hold. My bridesmaids exchanged uncomfortable glances, and Jane squeezed my hand in solidarity. "We love these dresses, Mrs. Reynolds," she said firmly. "Sarah has amazing taste." Evelyn's smile tightened. "Well, you girls haven't been to as many weddings as I have." The following week, we discovered she'd canceled our cake tasting appointment by calling the bakery claiming to be my assistant. When the owner called to reschedule and mentioned the cancellation, I was speechless. That evening, I finally broke down, tears of frustration flowing as I told Michael everything. "She's undermining every decision we make. It's like she's trying to sabotage our entire wedding." Michael looked pained, torn between the 2 women he loved most. "She's just excited and wants to help," he offered weakly, but I could see doubt in his eyes. "Canceling appointments behind our backs isn't helping," I insisted. The situation came to a head when Evelyn texted Michael photos of a dress she'd purchased for the wedding, an elegant, floor-length gown in ivory that could easily be mistaken for a wedding dress in photographs. Even Michael couldn't defend this. Red-faced, he finally confronted her over dinner at her house, with me sitting uncomfortably beside him. "Mom, you can't wear white to our wedding. You know that." Evelyn's eyes welled with tears immediately. "It's not white, it's ivory. And after everything I've done to help with this wedding, I'm being attacked for buying a dress I feel pretty in?" She looked at me accusingly. "I just want to feel included. Ever since you got engaged, I've been pushed aside, as if my only child getting married means nothing to me." Her shoulders shook with sobs as Michael moved to comfort her. Later, in the car ride home, Michael suggested that maybe we could give his mother specific responsibilities to help her feel more included. "If she has her own tasks, maybe she'll stop trying to control everything else," he reasoned. Though skeptical, I was willing to try anything that might improve the situation. "Fine," I agreed reluctantly. "She can help with the invitations. Everyone loves getting to see those before anyone else, right?" How naive I was to hand her the perfect sabotage opportunity on a silver platter. After months of design consultations, I'd finally created what I considered perfect invitations. Letterpress printed on thick cotton paper, with a custom watercolor of Rosemont Gardens' iconic cherry trees, and hand-calligraphed addresses on the envelopes. They represented everything about the intimate, personal wedding we'd been fighting to preserve. When I suggested that Evelyn could help with the invitations, she showed unexpected enthusiasm, offering to address all the envelopes with her excellent penmanship and handle the mailing process. "I'd love to be part of something so important," she said with what seemed like genuine warmth. "And it would save you so much time, Sarah." Relieved by this apparent olive branch, I gratefully accepted, providing her with our carefully curated guest list, the completed invitations, and pre-stamped envelopes. I even helped her organize a system to track which invitations had been sent. "I'll take care of everything," she promised, patting the boxes of invitations like precious cargo. "They'll all go out by Friday." The first hint that something was amiss came 3 weeks later when my college roommate Alexis called to ask about my wedding date. "I haven't seen an invitation yet, but I wanted to make sure I have the right weekend blocked off," she said casually. I assured her invitations had gone out weeks ago and that she was definitely on the guest list. "I'll check with Michael's. Mom, since she handled the mailing, but maybe yours got lost. I'll make sure you get one." Similar conversations followed with my cousin, a colleague, and even my hairstylist who'd been doing my hair for years and had been on our guest list from day one. As the RSVP deadline loomed with only a handful of responses, anxiety knotted in my stomach. When I brought up the concerning lack of RSVPs to Michael, he seemed puzzled but not alarmed. "Maybe people are just being flaky about responding," he suggested. "You know how it is these days." But I did know how it was. I'd planned dozens of weddings, and while some stragglers were normal, this extraordinary silence was not. When I mentioned it to Evelyn during Sunday dinner, she nodded sympathetically. People are so busy these days, and Rosemont Gardens is a bit out of the way for some of the family. I'm sure responses will pick up. Something in her tone made the hairs on my neck stand up. That night, I called my best friend Jane with mounting panic. Have you heard anything from any of the other bridesmaids about receiving their formal invitations? I know you all know the details already, but I'm worried something's wrong. Jane's pause confirmed my fears before she even spoke. I was going to ask you about that, actually. None of us have received anything, but we figured maybe you were sending the wedding party's invitations separately or something. My blood ran cold. Jane and my other bridesmaids had been at multiple planning events. Evelyn knew they were aware of all the wedding details. If they hadn't received invitations, it wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. I hung up and immediately confronted Michael, my hands shaking. I think your mother never sent the invitations. No one has received them. Not my best friends, not my family, no one. Michael's expression darkened, then shifted to defensive. That's a serious accusation, Sarah. My mother wouldn't do something like that. Maybe there was a problem with the mail. For every single invitation? I countered, my voice rising. That's not possible, and you know it. We had our first truly fierce argument that night, with Michael insisting I was being paranoid and me insisting his mother was actively trying to sabotage our wedding. We went to bed angry, backs turned to each other in cold silence. But while Michael slept, I lay awake, my event planner's mind cataloging every suspicious incident, every coincidence, every undermining comment. By morning, I was certain Evelyn had deliberately hidden or destroyed our invitations, and I was going to prove it. The next day, while Michael was at work, I called in a favor from Marco, a private investigator who occasionally worked security for my high-profile events. I need to check if emails have been sent from an address very similar to mine, I explained, describing my suspicions without going into embarrassing detail. Marco was professional and thorough, reporting back within hours. There's an email account created 3 weeks ago with an address 1 letter off from yours, he confirmed. It sent about 90 emails with the subject line, Important Wedding Update. Want me to try to access it? With Marco's help, we discovered the contents of these emails, a formal-looking announcement claiming that due to unforeseen circumstances, Michael and I had decided to postpone our wedding indefinitely and would be in touch when we set a new date. The emails had gone to nearly everyone on our guest list. My hands trembled with rage and betrayal as I stared at the evidence. But I needed more proof before confronting Michael and Evelyn. Using the spare key Michael had given me to his mother's house for emergencies, I let myself in while she was at her weekly hair appointment. I told myself this wasn't breaking in. I had a key, and I was family. The boxes of invitations weren't difficult to find, stacked neatly in her home office closet, still in the same organizational system I'd helped her create. 93 invitations, unsent, with their sealed, addressed, stamped envelopes. I took photos of everything, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure the neighbors could hear it. Next to the boxes was a notebook with Evelyn's handwriting, a meticulous list of guests she'd sent the fake postponement emails to, with check marks next to each name. I photographed this as well, hands shaking. As I was replacing everything exactly as I'd found it, I heard the garage door opening. Panicking, I slipped out the back door and around the side of the house just as Evelyn entered through the front, her new salon hairstyle perfect as she carried groceries inside. I called Michael immediately, my voice breaking as I said, I need to see you. Now, it's about the wedding. An hour later, in a coffee shop far from both our workplaces, I showed him everything, the fake email account, the photos of unsent invitations, his mother's checklist. Michael's face drained of color as he scrolled through the evidence on my phone. This can't be real, he whispered, but his eyes told me he knew it was. My mother wouldn't, but he couldn't finish the sentence. Call her, I said quietly. Ask her where our invitations are. See what she says. He did, putting the phone on speaker between us at our secluded corner table. Mom, Sarah's concerned about the wedding invitations. Did you send them all out like you promised? The slight pause before Evelyn answered told us everything. Of course I did, sweetheart. Why would she think otherwise? The lie hung in the air between us as Michael's eyes met mine, truly seeing the situation for the first time. We'll talk about this later, he said tightly before hanging up. That night, after reviewing all the evidence again at home, Michael finally accepted the truth. His mother had deliberately sabotaged our wedding, lying repeatedly to both of us. I'll handle this, he promised, his voice hard in a way I'd never heard before. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I had no idea she would go this far. As he left to confront his mother, I sat alone in our apartment, wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life by marrying into this family. Evelyn's betrayal was devastating, but almost more painful was how long it had taken Michael to believe me. As midnight came and went with no word from him, I began to wonder if his mother's influence was stronger than his love for me. What would happen next time she decided I wasn't good enough for her son? Would our children become pawns in her manipulation games? For the first time, I seriously considered calling off the wedding, not because I didn't love Michael, but because I wasn't sure our love could survive his mother's determination to destroy it. Michael returned just after 1 a.m., emotionally exhausted and looking older than I'd ever seen him. She admitted it, he said heavily, dropping onto our couch. She cried, apologized, swore she just panicked and didn't know how to fix it. According to Michael, Evelyn claimed she'd initially just set aside a few invitations for guests she thought were inappropriate. Mainly my college friends she considered too wild. But then panicked when I started asking questions. One lie led to another, Michael explained, repeating his mother's words. She knows she went too far and wants to make it right. I stared at him incredulously. Make it right? How exactly does she plan to undo telling everyone our wedding is canceled? Michael reached for my hand. She's offered to call everyone personally and explain there was a misunderstanding. She'll help us send new invitations immediately. He looked at me pleadingly. She's really sorry, Sarah. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. Despite my deep skepticism, I recognized the hope in Michael's eyes. He desperately wanted to believe his mother's remorse was genuine, that this could be resolved without having to choose between us. Against my better judgment, I agreed to a reconciliation dinner at Evelyn's house the following evening. We'll start fresh, Michael said, pulling me into an embrace. She knows now that we're serious and she can't come between us. Evelyn was the picture of contrition when we arrived, her eyes red-rimmed and her normally perfect makeup subdued. She embraced me immediately. I'm so deeply sorry, Sarah. What I did was unforgivable, and I completely understand if you hate me. She had prepared all of Michael's favorite childhood foods and set the table with her best china. Throughout dinner, she was uncharacteristically deferential, asking about our plans and nodding supportively at everything we said. I've already drafted an email explaining my terrible mistake, she told us, pulling out her laptop. I'll send it to everyone tonight and follow up with phone calls to make sure they know the wedding is still happening. As she opened her computer, a text notification appeared on the screen. Michael happened to be standing behind her and froze, his eyes fixed on the message. What's that? He asked, his voice suddenly cold. Evelyn quickly moved to close the laptop, but Michael was faster, turning the screen so both of us could see a series of texts between Evelyn and Michael's godfather, Thomas. The most recent read, any luck convincing Mike to postpone? Sarah seems nice enough, but rushing him into marriage when he's up for partnership isn't fair to him. Below were earlier messages where Evelyn detailed her concerns that I was rushing Michael into marriage before he's ready, and only interested in his future earnings. Most damning was Evelyn's reply to Thomas, sent just that morning. Dinner tonight with them, playing the remorseful mother. We'll update you after I talk some sense into Michael. The silence in the dining room was deafening. Evelyn's face had gone chalk white as she realized what we'd seen. Michael, I can explain, she began, but I'd heard enough. You weren't going to apologize at all, were you? I asked, my voice shaking. This whole dinner is just another manipulation. Evelyn's demeanor changed instantly, the contrite mask dropping away as she realized her game was exposed. You have no idea what's best for my son, she snapped, Years of barely concealed hostility finally breaking through. You've been pushing this wedding, pushing him to choose you over his family. He deserves someone who understands his obligations to his family, not some event planner with dollar signs in her eyes. Michael had been standing frozen, but at this he came to life. That's enough, Mother, he said sharply. Sarah has never pushed for anything. If anything, she's been incredibly patient with your interference and disrespect. Evelyn turned to him, her expression softening manipulatively. Sweetheart, I'm only thinking of your future. You've worked so hard for the partnership at the firm. Marriage is a huge distraction right now. I'm not saying never, just not right now. I'd heard enough. Gathering my purse, I stood shakily. I won't be discussed as if I'm not in the room. And I won't be painted as a gold digger by someone who's lied repeatedly to sabotage my relationship. Turning to Michael, I added, I'll be at home when you're ready to discuss what happens next. As I walked out, I heard Michael call my name, but I kept going, needing space to think clearly. Behind me, Evelyn's voice rose. See? She walks out when things get difficult. Is that who you want making decisions for your future? I waited in the car, tears streaming down my face, wondering if Michael would follow or stay to hash things out with his mother. 5 excruciating minutes later, he emerged from the house, his expression grim, but determined. The drive home was mostly silent, both of us processing the evening's revelations. When we arrived at our apartment, Michael finally spoke. I've been blind, he said quietly. I knew my mother could be difficult, but I never imagined she would deliberately try to destroy our relationship. He turned to me, his eyes filled with remorse. I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner. I'm sorry I let her treat you this way. He took my hands in his. I need you to know that I choose you, Sarah. Not just for the wedding, but for every day after. If that means limiting contact with my mother, then that's what I'll do. I wanted desperately to believe him, but the evening's revelations had shaken me to my core. How do I know she won't always come between us? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. Every disagreement, every major decision. Will I always be wondering if she's whispering in your ear? Michael's pained expression told me he understood the gravity of my question. I can't change the past, but I promise you, from this moment forward, we're a team. You and me against whatever comes, including my mother. I nodded, exhausted from the emotional whiplash of the day. I need some time to think, I told him honestly. I love you, but I need to be sure I can trust that. You'll stand with me not just today, but every time your mother tries to come between us. As I got ready for bed alone, I heard Michael making calls in the living room. First to his godfather Thomas to confront him about the text messages, then to his cousin Linda explaining the situation with his mother. He was drawing boundaries, just as he'd promised. Still, as I drifted into uneasy sleep, I couldn't help wondering if those boundaries would hold when tested again. And I had no doubt they would be tested, perhaps sooner than either of us expected. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I spent hours crying, alternating between rage at Evelyn's manipulation and fear that my relationship with Michael might not survive the fallout. My best friend, Jane, came over with coffee and pastries, sitting with me as I poured out the whole sordid story. What if this is just a preview of our entire marriage? I asked her, clutching a soggy tissue. Every holiday, every decision about children, every job opportunity. Will I always be fighting his mother's influence? Jane listened patiently, then asked the question that cut to the heart of the matter. Do you trust Michael to choose you? Not just now, but every time? I didn't have an immediate answer. My phone had been buzzing all morning with texts and calls from Michael, each more worried and apologetic than the last. I've told Mom we won't be speaking until she makes genuine amends, one message read. I've also called a therapist to help me work through my relationship with her. I love you and I'm committed to fixing this. Jane picked up my phone, scrolling through Michael's messages. These don't sound like a man who's wavering, she observed. But ultimately, only you can decide if you believe him. After Jane left, I spent hours thinking about what I truly wanted. Despite everything, I loved Michael deeply. We had built a life I was proud of, with shared dreams and values that aligned in all the ways that mattered most. Was I willing to throw that away because of his mother's toxic behavior? By evening, I had made my decision. I texted Michael asking to meet at a neutral location, the small park near our apartment where we often walked on weekends. He was already waiting when I arrived, his face tight with anxiety. "Thank you for coming," he said formally, as if afraid of presuming anything. We sat side by side on our bench, watching ducks glide across the pond. "I want our marriage to work," I began carefully, "but I need some things from you first." I outlined exactly what I needed. No contact with Evelyn until after the wedding, couples therapy to ensure we had tools to handle future conflicts, and his agreement that any children we might have would never be left alone with Evelyn until she had proven she could respect our boundaries. Michael listened intently, nodding at each point. "Yes to all of it," he said without hesitation when I finished. "And I want to add something else. I'm going to start individual therapy to work on establishing healthier boundaries with my mother. I should have done it years ago." His openness and immediate agreement reassured me, but I wasn't naive enough to think our problems were solved. "I love you," I told him, "but trust has been broken. It's going to take time to rebuild it." He nodded soberly. "I understand. I'm in this for the long haul, Sarah." We agreed to move forward with the wedding, but with a significantly delayed timeline to give us space to heal. What I didn't tell Michael was that I was already making contingency plans. The next day, while Michael was at work, I contacted all but our vendors to explain the situation in general terms. "We've had a family situation that's compromised our original invitations," I told them. "I need to know what our options are if we need to make changes." Most were sympathetic, having dealt with family wedding drama before. I identified a backup venue, a charming historic hotel downtown that had a last-minute cancellation and could accommodate us on short notice if needed. I worked with my most trusted colleague to create a new digital guest list with contact information that wasn't accessible to anyone but us. I wasn't proud of these secret preparations, but after Evelyn's repeated deceptions, I needed the security of a backup plan. 1 week after our park bench conversation, my caution proved justified. I received a confused call from our venue coordinator at Rosemont Gardens. "I just wanted to confirm that you're canceling your date," she said. "We received an email and follow-up call from your future mother-in-law." My blood ran cold as the coordinator continued. "She said you and Michael have decided to postpone indefinitely due to family illness." When I checked our wedding website that evening, I discovered that someone had accessed the admin panel and changed our wedding date to date TBD postponed. The IP address traced back to Evelyn's home computer. This was no longer about invitations or mother-in-law annoyances. This was a deliberate, sustained campaign to stop our wedding entirely. I called Michael immediately. "Your mother told Rosemont we're canceling and changed our wedding website," I said without preamble. "I have the proof. This has to stop now." Michael was silent for a long moment, then said in a voice I barely recognized, "I'll be home in 20 minutes. We need to talk." When he arrived, his expression was grim but determined. "Show me everything," he said, and I did. The venue's email confirming the cancellation request, the website's edit history showing changes from Evelyn's IP address, the fake email account that was still actively sending cancellation notices. Michael took it all in silently, his jaw tightening with each new piece of evidence. "I've been trying to understand her behavior, to find excuses," he said finally. "But there are no excuses for this. It's deliberate and it's cruel." He looked at me, his eyes clear and focused. "What do you want to do?" It was the question I'd been waiting for. Michael truly asking for my lead, not attempting to mediate or minimize. "I want to get married without your mother's interference," I said, simply. "I want us to take back control of our wedding and our relationship." I hesitated, then added, "And I already have a plan." "We moved the entire wedding without telling her," I explained, laying out the backup arrangements I'd been quietly making. New venue, new digital invitations sent directly from us with explicit instructions not to share details with Evelyn, and security at the door to ensure she doesn't crash it. Rather than being upset by my secret planning, Michael was impressed and immediately supportive. "Let's do it," he agreed. "She's left us no choice." Over the next 2 weeks, we executed what Michael jokingly called Operation Wedding Freedom. We booked the historic Hamilton Hotel with its elegant ballroom and rooftop garden for the ceremony. We sent personal emails and made phone calls to each guest, explaining that due to unforeseen circumstances, technically true, we had changed our venue and would appreciate their confidentiality regarding the new location. Most people were understanding, many having received the fake cancellation notices and been confused. "Just tell us when and where to be," my cousin laughed, "and maybe change your email passwords." We hired Marco, my investigator friend, to coordinate discreet security for the day. "No drama," I instructed him. "If she shows up, she's to be politely but firmly redirected to the parking area where she can see the ceremony from a distance, but not disrupt it." Michael made one last attempt at reason, meeting his mother for coffee to explain that her behavior had forced us to exclude her from the wedding. "You've shown repeatedly that you don't support our marriage," he told her calmly. "Until that changes, we need to create some distance." According to Michael, she cycled through tears, rage, and finally cold silence before walking out of the cafe without another word. The morning of our wedding dawned clear and perfect. I woke in our apartment surrounded by my bridesmaids who had stayed the night for our final preparations. Michael had stayed with his best man, observing the tradition of not seeing each other before the ceremony. As my friends helped me into my dress, an elegant A-line with vintage lace I'd fallen in love with months earlier, I felt surprisingly calm. Whatever happened today, Michael and I had already proven we could face challenges together. Jane was zipping up my dress when my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Mom somehow found out about today. She's been calling and texting nonstop. Marco is aware and handling it. I love you and can't wait to see you." I showed the message to Jane, who immediately took charge. "Nothing for you to worry about," she assured me. "Marco has this covered and you look absolutely stunning." At the hotel, everything was proceeding according to plan. The rooftop garden had been transformed with white chairs and an archway twined with cherry blossoms, a nod to our original, venue's iconic trees. Guests were being discreetly checked in by Marco's team, all of whom had photos of Evelyn and instructions on how to handle her if she appeared. Just as I was about to walk down the aisle on my father's arm, Marco slipped me a note. E arrived. Attempted to enter claiming medical emergency. Now in parking lot with clear view as discussed. M aware. All secure. I took a deep breath, exchanged a look with my father, who squeezed my hand reassuringly, and nodded to the string quartet to begin the processional. As I walked toward Michael, my eyes locked on his. I was briefly aware of a figure standing in the parking lot below, Evelyn in what appeared to be a light-colored dress, watching from behind the security perimeter. But her presence couldn't touch the joy of this moment. Michael's eyes shone with tears as he took my hands at the altar. "You look incredible," he whispered, and then added with a small smile, "Mission accomplished." Our ceremony was everything we had hoped for: personal, emotional, and intimate. Michael's vows included a promise that brought tears to my eyes. "I choose you today and every day. Our marriage comes first, and I will protect it and cherish it above all other relationships." The reception that followed was joyful and relaxed, with none of the tension that had marked the preceding months. Through dinner and dancing, I occasionally caught myself scanning the room, half expecting to see Evelyn attempting to crash the party. Marco approached during the cake cutting to inform us that there had been one more attempt. Evelyn trying to talk her way past hotel security by claiming she'd forgotten her invitation, but she had been firmly redirected back to the public areas. Our photographer actually caught a picture of her being escorted away, Marco mentioned with professional detachment. "I can have it deleted if you prefer." Michael and I exchanged glances. Then Michael shook his head. "Keep it," he said quietly. "It's part of our story, for better or worse." As we prepared to leave the reception amid a shower of flower petals, Michael pulled me close. "Thank you for not giving up on us," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "I know it wasn't easy." I kissed him, aware of our guests cheering around us. "We're a team now," I reminded him. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." That night, as we flew to Belize for our honeymoon, I reflected on the tumultuous path that had led to this day. Perhaps it wasn't the perfect wedding I had initially imagined, but it was perfectly us, resilient, determined, and ultimately triumphant. And somewhere in all the chaos, I had discovered a strength I hadn't known I possessed. Our 2 weeks in Belize were exactly what we needed. Sun-soaked days exploring ancient ruins and crystal-clear cenotes, nights spent planning our future without interference or drama. For the first time in months, we were just Sarah and Michael, not a couple under siege. "When we get home," Michael said one evening as we watched the sunset from our private deck, "I want us to be clear about how we're going to handle my mother. No mixed messages, no different standards." I nodded, appreciating his proactive approach. "I think we need professional help with that conversation," I suggested. "Someone who can help us communicate our boundaries clearly without it becoming emotionally charged." Michael agreed, and upon our return, we found a family therapist specializing in in-law relationships. Dr. Chen helped us script our first post-wedding meeting with Evelyn, which took place at a neutral restaurant 3 weeks after our honeymoon. "Thank you for meeting us," Michael began, following the approach we'd practiced. "We want to have a relationship with you, but it needs to be healthier than it's been." Evelyn, dressed impeccably as always, kept her expression carefully neutral. "I understand you're upset about the wedding," she said, her tone suggesting we were overreacting. "But families have disagreements. We need to move past it." I took a deep breath, sticking to our plan. "What happened wasn't a disagreement, Evelyn. You actively tried to prevent our wedding multiple times. That's not something we can simply move past without addressing it." Michael outlined our boundaries clearly. Weekly phone calls instead of daily, advance notice before visits, no undermining comments about our relationship, and most importantly, no unilateral decisions affecting our lives. "If these boundaries aren't respected," he concluded, "we'll need to limit contact until they are." Evelyn's face hardened. "So I'm being punished for caring about my son's future? For wanting to make sure he wasn't rushing into something he'd regret?" She turned to Michael, ignoring me completely. "I've only ever wanted what's best for you. One day when you have children, you'll understand." Michael's response made me profoundly grateful for the work he'd been doing in therapy. "Mom, I love you, but your behavior wasn't protective. It was controlling. And I need you to acknowledge that and apologize to Sarah if you want to be part of our lives moving forward." Evelyn left abruptly after that, claiming a headache. The following weeks were difficult as she alternated between cold silence and tearful phone calls to Michael claiming I was turning him against her. Throughout it all, Michael remained steadfast, reminding her gently but firmly of our boundaries each time she tested them. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, things began to change. 3 months after our wedding, Evelyn called to invite us both to dinner, the first time she'd explicitly included me in an invitation. 6 months in, she asked about my work without making any undermining comments. Small steps, but significant ones. Michael continued his individual therapy, working through the complex dynamics of his relationship with his mother. "I never realized how much I'd been shaped by always trying to make her happy," he confided one night. "It's exhausting to be someone's entire world." I supported his journey while maintaining my own boundaries, making it clear that while I hoped for reconciliation, I wouldn't sacrifice my well-being for it. On our first anniversary, we returned to the Hamilton Hotel for dinner, reminiscing about our wedding day. "I don't regret how we handled it," Michael said, raising his glass in a toast. "Standing up to my mother was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it was also one of the most important." I clinked my glass against his. To difficult beginnings and stronger futures. 2 weeks later, we discovered I was pregnant, adding new urgency to our ongoing boundary work with Evelyn. When we shared the news, her immediate response was telling. "I hope you'll let me be involved this time," she said, already positioning herself as the victim. Michael took her hands gently but firmly. "Mom, we want you in our child's life, but as a grandmother who respects us as parents, can you be that person?" It was the first time I saw genuine reflection in Evelyn's eyes. "I'll try," she said after a long pause. "I don't want to lose my grandchild the way I almost lost you." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start. As my pregnancy progressed, Evelyn surprised us by mostly respecting our boundaries. She asked before buying baby items, deferred to our decisions about the nursery, and even attended a grandparenting class at the local hospital. When she occasionally slipped into old patterns, Michael addressed it immediately, preventing small issues from festering into larger conflicts. Looking back now, with our daughter Emma sleeping peacefully in the nursery, I realize how much stronger our marriage is for having faced such challenges at the beginning. We learned early that protecting our relationship requires vigilance, clear communication, and sometimes difficult decisions. We discovered that love isn't just about the easy moments, but about how you navigate the hardest ones together. And, perhaps most importantly, we learned that healthy boundaries aren't walls meant to keep people out. They're guidelines that show others how to be part of your life in a way that's respectful and loving. Evelyn isn't a perfect grandmother, and we still have moments of tension, but she's learning, as are we all. Last week, when she asked before picking up Emma instead of simply taking her, Michael and I exchanged glances of quiet triumph. Small victories accumulated over time are creating a new family dynamic, one where everyone's role is respected. If you're facing similar challenges with difficult in-laws or family members who don't respect boundaries, remember that you're not alone. The path to healthy relationships isn't always straightforward, and sometimes it requires making hard choices to protect what matters most. But with commitment, clear boundaries, and professional support when needed, it is possible to transform even the most challenging family dynamics. I'd love to hear your stories and how you've handled similar situations in your own relationships. Have you ever had to stand up to a family member who was undermining your relationship? What strategies worked for you? Share your experiences in the comments below, and remember to subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories about navigating complex family relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and may your own boundaries always be respected and your relationships strengthened by the challenges you overcome together.